majority of people are doing the right thing with these very heavy restrictions that have been put in place. So I want to thank all of those South Australians who are doing the right thing. By following these restrictions, we will save lives in South Australia, but we are only as strong as our weakest link. And so it's very important that we send a strong message to those people that might be contemplating doing the right thing, that there are going to be penalties, and there are going to be very heavy penalties. This morning, the Cabinet met, and then I've just come back from Government House where His Excellency, the Honourable Hugh Van Lay, Governor of South Australia, has made new regulations to put in place in South Australia, effective immediately, new on-the-spot fines for people who are doing the wrong thing with regards to isolation. I'm now going to ask our Police Commissioner, Grant Stevens, to run us through the details. Commissioner.
Thank you, Premier, and can I just reinforce those words that our observations are that the overwhelming number of South Australians are complying with the restrictions that have been put in place. We've seen a growing level of understanding about the seriousness of these restrictions and why they are being implemented. But having said that, we do know that there are some people who are not complying. There are instances where we've established that non-compliance is through a lack of understanding or a full appreciation of the gravity of these requirements. But the announcement today that we have the ability to issue an expiation notice of $1,000 for individuals or $5,000 for a body corporate who are found to be not compliant will give us an extra tool that we can use to ensure people who choose not to do the right thing can be held accountable for their behaviours. Prior to this, we had the ability to initiate a prosecution and take a person to court where a maximum penalty was $20,000. Obviously that is a complex process that will take time. The ability to issue an expiation notice on the spot, I think, sends a very strong and quick message, and I think it will send messages throughout the community that this is being taken seriously, and people who do not comply will be facing an immediate penalty.
In regards to these fines, are these some of the toughest fines in the country, banning these groups of 10?
The expiations primarily will relate to people who are required to self-quarantine or self-isolate and breach those requirements. There are opportunities for us to explore whether the issue of an expiation notice is appropriate in circumstances where we have directed that groups of no more than 10 meet. But the principal objective here is to ensure that people required to self-quarantine, people who we believe present a risk of spreading the infection, comply with those obligations. The gatherings and groups is about minimising the opportunity for this virus to spread. As the Chief Public Health Officer has said, the virus does not spread itself, people spread the virus. So the obligations on people not to gather in groups of more than 10 is to limit the opportunity for this virus to spread.
So at the moment, people gathering groups of more than 10 can't be hit with these fines?
Well, we're looking at that now. It's very difficult in social circumstances for us to apply that sort of enforcement, because the reality is there are some exemptions to the groups of 10. Family members can gather together, so it becomes a bit of a challenge for police officers in an open space area to make that determination, and we can't be stopping and talking to everybody. So we'll be applying this enforcement tool primarily for quarantine and isolation purposes.
You talk about a lack of understanding. You announced the restriction last night pretty quietly. How is the people supposed to know about it if you announce it late at night with little to no fanfare?
What we'd hope is people appreciate the dynamic nature of this incident that we're dealing with, this spread of the virus. People are working extremely hard to produce these directions and at very long and late hours. And there is not a lot of time for us to do much more than to push them out through normal channels. We're relying on our partners in the media to help magnify that message and make sure people understand their obligations. But I can only praise the people who are working on developing these directions for unique and unprecedented circumstances that have never been dealt with before. We are writing the rules for this thing every single day. So this is a real challenge for us, but it's one that people are embracing and standing up to.
Have you issued any of these fines yet?
Oh, as the Premier said, the Governor has only just signed off on the regulations, so they're effective immediately, and police officers who are doing compliance checks will have that opportunity to issue expiations. We will always assess the circumstances, and there may be a situation where an expiation notice is not issued, and we'll give people a warning. but people must understand if they are breaching these obligations regarding quarantine or isolation, they may be subject to a $1,000 expiation notice on the spot.
How many checks are you doing roughly each day?
Health have been providing us information, a list of persons to be checked, and that has averaged about 10 to 15 checks a day, and we have done all of those checks at the request of Health. But since we've implemented the border restrictions from the 16th of March, we are now compiling our own database, and we are now significantly ramping up the number of compliance checks that we're doing, because we're doing those requested by Health, plus we're doing the ones that we are able to source from our own database.
Just in terms of the gatherings of 10 people, in the sort of the list there, it says that you can seek exemptions. What's the process of seeking exemptions? Is that quite a difficult process?
Look, it's, as I've said, yeah, a lot of people are learning as we go on this, and we're trying to honour the intentions of the Chief Public Health Officer's advice to limit the spread of this virus. We are in contact with certain industries and sectors who are seeking to identify whether or not an exemption is available, and we are working with those. So at this point in time, we have had no significant issues in arranging that sort of contact and advice to those people who are seeking that advice.
Is Racing South Australia one of those industries that is?
We've been in negotiations with Racing South Australia this morning, and we've arrived at a position which they're very happy with, that they can continue with their events. But there are severe restrictions put in place into how those events will be run, and our investigation team will be paying attention to those events to ensure they are complying with the undertakings they've made and the restrictions that are applicable generally.
What do you mean by severe restrictions? Is that?
They've given an undertaking to make sure that the way they run the event does not allow for people to gather in groups of more than 10, and that they are applying strict social distancing rules as well. So their event will continue today and for the foreseeable future, and if there are any changes to that, then we'll be working with that industry to make sure they understand what further restrictions are in place.
What other industries have you been in contact with this morning?
Well, personally, I've been in touch with no other industries, but we are aware that the changes that we've approved for horse racing will apply to greyhound racing. We'll work through other sectors as they make an approach to us, or if there's any requirement for clarification.
Do you have any idea of the numbers of people that you are at the moment monitoring in self-isolation or quarantine?
Not specifically, because a lot of people have elected to self-isolate based on the advice provided by government. So there are probably thousands of people that are not on a register or on a list, on the basis that they have recognised the need for them to self-isolate and have done so. So a lot of the checks, the contacts that we've put in place weren't in existence when we first expected people to start self-isolating in the interest of the broader community. So there are a lot of people out there we don't know about, but the general sense in the community is most people are complying. We do get contacts from concerned members of the community who are advising us of suspected non-compliance, and we are compiling that information, providing it to Health, and determining whether we should follow up on that.
Are you encouraging people to do that, to dob in their neighbours, so to speak?
We're quite happy to receive contact. There are significant numbers of people who are self-quarantining at the moment, but if people have serious concerns about compliance, then they can call our police contact line on 131444 or use Crime Stoppers to provide that information, and we will assess it and follow up where necessary.
Premier, do you mind if I ask you, I guess with Easter just around the corner now, and obviously a lot of people might have booked accommodation through the Book Them Out campaign, are you now urging people to rethink those travel plans?
We're really asking people in South Australia to rethink their Easter holiday plans. This is the advice that we've just received from Dr. Nicholas Spurrier. We've got to be very careful about large groups of people from Adelaide travelling to certain areas across the state. So we're asking people to stay at home with their family as much as they possibly can. If they do have their own holiday home, then that might be an exemption where they can go to their own holiday home, stay with their own family group, not have different groups and parties over Easter. These are extraordinary restrictions, but I know for a fact that if we follow these restrictions, we'll put ourselves in the very best position to get through this extraordinarily difficult time.
In particular, Kangaroo Island residents are quite concerned about it going over there. Would you look at cutting KI off?
Look, I really think that holidaying on Kangaroo Island now, unfortunately, is over. The reality is that this is an area of South Australia which is cut off from the mainland. It will be more difficult for healthcare services to provide high-level care should a very significant outbreak occur. So non-essential travel to Kangaroo Island going forward, quite frankly, is now no longer advised.
Do you feel as though these new measures, these fines, these 10 people gathering bans, I mean, we are a little bit behind other states in terms of the number of cases, but do you think we're really therefore keeping on top of it?
Yeah, we're listening to the experts and they're very clear, they're very pleased with our testing regime here in South Australia. We don't have exponential growth in the number of people that are contracting the virus. We've got really good rapid testing and assessment laboratories and clinics right across South Australia, not just in metropolitan Adelaide, but right across South Australia. And at the same time, these new restrictions that are coming into place are really, really slowing the spread of this disease, and that's giving us time. That's giving us valuable time to put all of the health resources that we need in place so that when we do hit that peak, we've got them in place, we'll save lives by doing this.
It's my understanding that it's only really Tasmania that's putting that 10-person restriction as well. I guess what prompted it here?
Well, again, sitting down between the Police Commissioner, who is the state coordinator during a major emergency, and Dr. Nicholas Spurrier, who's the Chief Public Health Officer, and working out what are the things that we need to do in South Australia to slow the spread of this disease. So there's no point in staying away from a cafe if people are just having large parties at home. We've got to send a very strong message that this sort of dangerous behaviour doesn't only put individuals in danger, but also their families and the broader community in South Australia. So they're just not going to be tolerated. These new restrictions are important. If they're followed, they'll save lives. It's as simple as that.
Now, it is a lovely day outside, and obviously we saw a lot of people going to St Kilda Beach yesterday. We saw the scenes at Bondi. What are you doing to stop that happening at our beaches?
Look, people can walk along the beach. We can't stop people from going out and walking along the beach, and often families can go, and there's no restriction on family groups spending time together. They can be in close contact because they're going to be in close contact at home. What we're trying to avoid is scenes like we saw in Bondi with thousands of people congregating on the beaches. So we're saying it's a beautiful day. We don't want thousands and thousands of people all bumping into each other. If you're going down to the beach, great. If you're getting exercise, great. If you're with your family, great. But as much as possible, socially isolate, stay away from people. If we do this, then we will slow the spread. If we do this, we'll save lives.
So you're not considering closing down the beaches?
No, I think it's really important, and Dr. Nicholas Spurrier has been very clear on this, that we need to have exercise. We need to have exercise during this period. It is a beautiful day, but it's not an opportunity for thousands of people to congregate and spread this disease. Go out, enjoy the day, but socially isolate as much as you possibly can at the moment, and by doing that, we put South Australia in a much better position than most other places around the world.
Just Commissioner, just quickly on that point, is that something that police will be looking at today at the beaches?
We have patrols down on the coastal areas, and where they have concerns about people's behaviour in terms of social isolating, they'll be encouraging them to comply with the 4 metre rule, social distancing. And we also have visual messaging signs along the beachfront to remind people of the expectations in terms of social distancing. So we'll be certainly paying attention.
Do you think there needs to be another mass text message sent clarifying all the different restrictions that have now been put into place?
That'll be a very big text message. Like I said, we're relying on the media to help us amplify that message as much as possible. We are telling people where they can go to find the restrictions or information about the restrictions, and communicating with specific sectors who need that sort of direct advice. So I think everybody's doing as much as they can to make sure people understand, but there are some pretty simple principles here. Social distancing is the key. Don't allow large gatherings, and as the Premier has said, that will go a long way to saving lives within our community.
Cool.